I'm Katy Wright, Director of Gaming for Everyone at Xbox. So today I am here joined by some fabulous panelists, 2 in person and 1 via Teams, courtesy of the coronavirus. So we are handling this remote. So to start, I would like to ask my panelists to introduce themselves and a little bit about why you said yes to being on a panel about inclusivity in game design. So let's start with you, Dan.
Great. I'm Dan Greenawalt. I'm the creative director for the Forza franchise and one of the founders of Turn 10. I agreed to be on this because I'm really passionate about this area. I think that accessibility, we're just scratching the surface, and I'm excited where we can go next. But it also brings teams together in a really cool way and builds empathy, which is the key to making great games in the future.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for being here. And you, Elise?
Hi, I'm Elise Baldwin. I'm the audio director on the Microsoft publishing team for Tell Me Why. This is a product that is announced but not yet released. It's being developed by Don't Nod Entertainment in France and being published by Xbox Publishing. The title is a first in kind in some ways. I believe that it is featuring the first playable transgender protagonist in a game released by a major studio. I'm really proud of the work that we've done on the project. It's been by far the most inclusive production I've ever worked on in my 20 plus years doing game audio. And I also, as a member of the LGBTQ community, have long felt like I've had so many opportunities in my career to contribute meaningfully to my discipline expertise. But this is the first production I've ever worked on where I felt like my lived experience and my knowledge of the LGBTQ plus community could bring just so much to the culture of my team, to our inclusive production practices, and really have positive impact upon the development of this product. So it's been kind of a dream project for me.
That's awesome. Can't wait to dive in more. First, let's introduce Dave. 2 Ds. Dave's from Teams, yes.
I'm Dave Evans. I'm the owner and studio director of Falling Squirrel Games, and we're making a audio-based game for everybody. It's an action adventure, but it obviously has some relevance to the visually impaired and low vision community. And I'm a developer who kind of walked backwards into developing an accessible game. So I think I have a story that maybe other developers will hopefully relate to and maybe be inspired by, I hope.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you. And so just to set a little bit of context, when we talk about gaming for everyone within Team Xbox, that is really our commitment to make Xbox a place where everyone can have fun. And we recognize that fun means different things to different people. So it's our ongoing effort to be very intentional about bringing inclusive practices and thinkings and design into everything we do across Team Xbox. Because we know that inclusion doesn't happen by default. And so we have to be really intentional about bringing it into our practices every day. And so especially knowing that inclusion doesn't happen by default. I'm curious to look to you guys to ask, once you made the decision that you wanted to make a more inclusive game, what were some of the challenges that you came up against, and how did you approach those as game devs? So we'll start with you, Dan.
So we've got a bit of a history here at Forza and at Turn 10 with building inclusive games, and it starts even back in the original game. And it's very personal, I think, for most people, but I had a nephew who was missing a few digits, and he loved gaming. And I saw no reason why we couldn't get him excited about cars and give him an experience in games. And so we started looking at different control schemes. And it's that kind of narrow-minded beginning that birthed something much bigger. So we got a lot of success out of that. We had some feedback from players, and that was very early on. We also looked at the green line that changes color. And it was not colorblind compliant, and we didn't realize that. And we got feedback from people on our own team who were like, this is cool, but I can't use it. So it was that kind of beginning that allowed us to push ourselves more and more and more every version. And I don't think we're very far along in this journey. It's really about taking steps every single time, having new targets, bringing players in and getting great feedback. So it started small, with our friends and family, and now it's gotten much bigger where we've got inclusivity sprints, and it's really part of how we build the game itself.
That's awesome. Thank you.
That's amazing.
Elise, what challenges did you come up with?
Oh, so many. So maybe to talk about this a little bit, I have to talk about the game a little bit. Just broad strokes. Tell Me Why is a 3-episode narrative, and the story is really focused around a set of twins. The story is based in a rural Alaskan community that has a large indigenous population. So when we started working on this project, the first thing we thought was, oh, we need to know more about this place and these communities that we are going to portray in this product. And so to that end, we partnered with an amazing foundation called the Hoona Heritage Foundation, run by a woman named Amelia Wilson. It's a Tlingit advocacy and cultural education group that she runs out of Hoona, which is a small village on the coast of Southeast Alaska. There are 800 people in this village. We were told there were 4,000 bears on the island and 800 people.
Wow.
But Amelia put together this amazing research trip for both the Microsoft publishing team and for the Don't Nod team. We basically got to go to Hoona for 10 days. She gave us access to so many people in the community that corresponded to characters in our game. Artists, tradespeople, village elders, I mean, the list just goes on and on, LGBTQ members of the community. It was really amazing, and we did a lot of Tlingit cultural activities as well while we were there, and that really gave us an opportunity to really understand what life in this particular setting would be like. Another aspect of the project that I think was challenging was casting our Tyler actor. So Tyler is the trans protagonist that I mentioned earlier, and it was an interesting challenge to cast this role because we knew from the very beginning that we wanted to do all of our casting authentically, by which I mean that basically the actors playing those roles have lived experience of the characters they are depicting. So just to kind of break that down for a minute, and we want to do that with all of our roles. And for the role of Tyler, that was particularly complex because there aren't a lot of trans and non-binary actors who are represented by agents in the industry. And also there are a lot of industry infrastructural impediments to finding those actors. For example, a lot of the most commonly used casting tools are very binary in their gender designations. So that was a really interesting process as well, working with our casting director. She ended up doing a tremendous amount of non-traditional sourcing of talent. We also partnered very closely with GLAAD. GLAAD is an LGBTQ media advocacy group. They've been around for 30 years. Basically what they do is help media creators to get it right. They work primarily in film and video, television, but also in gaming. Their director of transgender media, Nick Adams, was invaluable to us. We partnered so closely with him. He's like an extended part of our development team. And one of the things he did for us was help us source candidates for this particular role, as well as giving intensely deep feedback on script and character art and all other sorts of aspects of the LGBTQ characters in the game, of which there are several.
Awesome. So it sounds like you infused a lot of creativity and not just doing things the same old way, but thinking every step of the way, how do we get creative to make sure it remains authentic?
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
That was really our guiding star, if you will, is
That's
like how do we bolster the creative voices within our production team through these strategic partnerships and other ways in order to basically get the right voices in the room to make this product completely authentic.
That is awesome. So now I want to shift it over to Dave. I'm sorry, I'm just going to own that. I'm going to make that mistake with Dan and Dave. So shift it over to Dave. As an independent developer, really starting with the intention of making a very inclusive game from the beginning, what challenges did you face and how did you approach those challenges?
Yeah, at the actual beginning, I'd actually started with wanting to utilize the things that I could do relatively cheaply. I mean, that's a lot of the time independent developers spend time sort of assessing what they can do well and trying to apply it in some way. And because I had experience with voiceover, directing, and writing, I started in film and television. I actually started with the idea of making an all-audio game, and then very quickly realized that this would have potentially an application within the low vision and blind community. So I very relatively soon in production, partnered with the CNIB, basically to set up focus testing with the community and get feedback from them. And what I discovered was, first of all, it's an incredibly welcoming community. And it's also, and this shouldn't have been a surprise, but probably one of the biggest challenges with making a game for a community that's so broad is the fact that it's very difficult to make a game for everybody in any scenario. But as you can imagine, there's people within this community that have all sorts of different game interests and familiarity with video games and skill levels. So one thing we had to do right away is make a decision as to how we would take an action adventure, which has a broad appeal, we hope, and make it playable across a gambit of backgrounds and ages and game experience. So that's probably our biggest challenge, and then a lot of things came out of those challenges.
Cool. I want to do a real quick acronym check. You said you partnered with the CIB.
CNIB, it's the Canadian National Institute for the Blind.
Awesome.
I'm from Canada.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I also want to touch on another thing that you said, and then have you all kind of respond to it, because this is at a root of the discussion today, where you said it's really hard to make a game for everyone. And I know I get asked that question a lot, where if I say gaming for everyone, that's what I lead at Microsoft, but it's like, what does that even mean? And a lot of times, the first reaction that I get, especially from game devs, is that I'm asking them to water down their game, or make it boring, or make sure that every single person can play your game. When really that's not absolutely what we're about. We're about making it a place where anytime anyone comes to Xbox, they can find the type of fun that they're looking for. But I know that can be, as a perceived challenge. So I'm wondering if in the conversations that you guys had, did that challenge come across where making a game for everyone was overwhelming? Or how did you kind of go after that and approach how did you approach your inclusivity and building into inclusivity into your game? Let's start with you, Dan.
Great. It's a great question. I think it's easy to look at it so broadly that you can't actually do anything. And a big part of game development is focus. Focus. I mean, you go broad, you come up with great big ideas, and then you narrow in. And so if you're trying to really, capture everybody, it's too much. So I think some of it starts with the passion of the team. I mentioned empathy. That's, to me, what this comes down to, is connecting our team, which are so passionate about making entertainment, and bringing people into our circle. We love cars, we love games, we want more people into that circle. Connecting them with different individuals to inspire their passion. And then that kind of guides the team somewhat. So in that early phase, before we start narrowing, we start targeting specific things we can go for. And we play the long game. And I think that's a good place to go generally. If you can think about the long game and gaining accessibility features over time, whether that's in updates or in subsequent games, it makes it less of a daunting task. You can just reach out to a community, build it in conjunction with them, have a passionate team thinking of new ideas, play with them in person, and these features they deliver themselves in a sense. That's an awful way to say it to game developers, because we all know this is an incredibly hard job. But when you're passionate about it and you're actually in contact with players, the work feels much lighter. It feels much easier. So as we've looked at low vision gamers, as we've looked at other features we can do, be it updates in Horizon for subtitles, those came from feedback with our players, and they also came with just this commitment to build it greater and better over time.
It's kind of like the chicken and the egg piece, right? If the features aren't there, then the people who need them can't play, so they can't give you the feedback. But then once it's there, then it starts opening the door to more and more conversations about how your game can be even more inclusive, which ultimately means more people can play.
Absolutely, and I do think it's worth noting that bringing those players into our home, bringing them into our studio space and playing with them opens the hearts of our teams. And that is where I've seen the greatest growth. We are creative people. We love to make creative things. But if it's just this narrow-minded idea or vision that we have by ourselves, I'm not saying that can't work in games. What I'm saying is for our game, that's not been as successful. It's a big team. I need them inspired and creative, and having people in our home playing our games with us, it really brings out great new features and ideas.
I love that. So, Elise, like you talk a lot about representation in the game and how, can you say a little bit more about why representation in a game is so important to you? And what, and more in particular, what do you hope other devs would take away from that as to why representation is so important?
Yeah, sure. So I think respectful representation is critical in games for the reason that I believe it's the way that an audience develops a more deep, more real and dimensional understanding of a community that they might not be a part of or have exposure to. And so in the case of Tell Me Why, it's actually an interesting question that you asked about this myth around watering down a narrative or a project. I never once thought of this product as pandering or watering down in any way. I actually see this product as doing two things simultaneously, which is one, to present a narrative that includes characters that have been historically misrepresented or marginalized inside of video game production. So to provide like an experience, a narrative experience for that community. And also, one thing that I was really concerned about in the making of this game was that Tyler's transness would become the focus of the players and the game. And I say that because Tyler's transness is an important part of the narrative, but it is not what the game is about. And so I think that it's actually part of a much larger story around family history and secrets. And I think that we were really able to like land those elements of the story in a way that actually like creates a super compelling and authentic experience for a really broad audience, some of whom may never have seen themselves reflected in a video game before. I'm not entirely sure I answered your question, the latter half of your question.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think what we're trying to hear from you is that as you're going through this experience, and in really the level of detail that you guys went through wasn't just like, yep, let's have this character, and that character, and in one day kind of designed out. And I might, being a little facetious and exaggerating there a little bit, but the level of discussions and research and just intentionality that you put to designing the characters to make sure that they weren't one-dimensional, but that they were fully developed just like you do any other character.
Absolutely.
And so they didn't become that thing that they're meant to represent in a game. They really were full characters in and of themselves.
Absolutely. Can I just add one small thing that while I'm thinking about it? So I can't be very specific about where this data comes from, but we basically have evidence, hard science inside of Xbox that products that intentionally employ inclusive production practices and diversify their character sets basically develop more significantly, substantially, measurably more diverse audiences. And when I say diversity, I'm talking about racial and ethnic diversity, I'm talking about gender identity diversity, I'm talking about anything demographic that you could measure about the characters. So we have hard data from inside of Xbox that shows that this is true. Just, to kind of add to your like myth busting, I just want to say that like the intentionality yields additional audience and players.
So, and also knowing that how immersive of a gaming experience, or how immersive of an experience gaming can be for people. This next question I'd like to go to you, Dan, knowing that you were really designing an experience for a traditionally underserved audience with visually impaired or blind gamers. And talk about myth busting, right? And that happens a lot. And so what kinds of learnings or in your approach would you like to share with other game devs about your experience in creating the Veil for very much an underserved market when it comes to gaming?
Yeah, one of the first things I came across was one of the consultants that I met through the CNIB was talking about his experience playing games with his wife, who's sighted, and he was basically talking about all the little things a game could do to make it more accessible, even though it couldn't be 100% accessible for him, being completely blind. And it made me think that I'd hate to see developers be afraid to add certain elements of accessibility with the fear that they didn't go far enough, because these little things that you can bring to your game when you think of them or learn about them can go a long way. And I think it also speaks to the way many people in the low vision and blind community play games. So they do play them with other people from other communities. So that was one thing that struck me is maybe I don't have to get it right or perfect on my first attempt. It's the fact that I'm trying to do this at all that's important. And then making, of course, a game for the visually impaired community that has no visuals. It's not accessible to the deaf community. So that's it's for another step, I think. So it's okay to take measures and play to your strengths.
Absolutely, and that's. There's so many good nuggets in there that we can extend to other pieces. And I want to go back to within Turn 10, I know you guys have done inclusive design sprints, and that's something that we do within Microsoft. But can you share a little bit more about your experience with inclusive design sprints and how they have ultimately shaped the games that you've been making?
Yeah, and I think it's important to note also that, in my opinion, great design is adaptable. Great design is inclusive, but it's not necessarily you design it how you think. You put options together, you test it out, you see, and you get some magic. I mean, it's a little bit of alchemy in there when you're really creating great entertainment. So there are features that we've put in place over the years for one reason, and they've had a secondary benefit towards a different group. And then we hear that and we go, oh, we should build on that. We should make that greater. Inclusivity sprints are very much that way. So we bring players into user research labs. We bring them into our studio. We interview them and hear how they game. We watch them game. We get videos of how they game in their own home. We find out about the problems that they have with gaming, as well as their motivations and their interests, and we get to connect with how they feel. And then we come up with ideas, and some of that's working with them and having them as part of the idea process. Some of it's just our team going off and we review the videos, and it's that input that is gonna create new ideas. So if I'm kind of alone in a cave by myself, I mean, I'm as creative as the next person, but it's really that exposure to other people and the empathy that's gonna bring more out of me. So these inclusive design sprints have exposed the team to different ways of thinking that they didn't really know about. And then as we create features, they spawn new ideas. So I think it's even worth noting, like, adaptive design inside of like your phone. When you look at a website and how a website goes to your phone, it gets smaller and it changes. That has tremendous benefit to a low vision community as well. And when I look at games and I look at xCloud and where we're trying to go, I think there are a lot of features that we can be developing and testing with inclusive tenets in mind that will also help xCloud. They're going to help us go to more devices. It's again, good design is extensible and adaptive design.
And there's that one tagline from an inclusive design principle is design for one, extend to many.
Yeah.
And so how many of those, if you design for an extreme case, but then that ends up applying and opening up all these other scenarios that you didn't even think of. Like with Copilot, that's one of my favorite, that feature where it was designed for someone from an accessibility perspective, but now it allows parents and child to play together when the kid is really young and all they want to do is hit one button. Or a brand new person playing with someone who's been gaming for years. It's an easier way to approach the games. And so it's amazing how many times when you go through an experience like that, listening to people especially people who have traditionally been marginalized, because they tend to have such awesome feedback of little things that you can do that make the experience so much more meaningful.
Yeah. And I struggle when I talk about this, even in front of the team, I get a little teared up. The passion that these gamers have to play our games, and they can't. It kind of kills me. I want to bring them into our fold. And so when I meet them and we talk about ideas for them, they so badly want to play. And I want them in too. So I kind of feel like we should do anything to meet them halfway. And yes, if we can do a feature that's extensible to many, all the better. And then we get the feedback, and this is where I feel so blessed that we get feedback that somebody we weren't even designing for was able to kind of twist and tweak the feature we built to be able to play and be part of our community. It's incredible. It's incredible.
I love that. And even to thinking about really starting with a particular audience in mind, but then recognizing how it can be fun for people beyond that audience. I know, Dave, when we've talked a little bit about how you started your game as an audio-only game and really partnering with some blind gamers to really make sure it was a meaningful experience for them, but that when you're finding out is that it's actually a really fun game for sighted players as well. And I can attest to that, even just watching some early views, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't wait for this to come out. But can you share a little bit about your insights there and going through that experience where you started for focusing on one audience, but then as you got into it, you realized how many more people could enjoy the game as well?
Yeah, I guess that was one thing I hadn't considered in terms of how powerful it would be to remove the visuals from a game, but still have a robust soundscape. And this is something that's only really been possible to do really well with the advent of VR. So all that spatialized audio they've added has allowed a small developer like myself to make some really great sound experiences. And I think the one impression that everybody seems to get from the game, regardless of community, is how immersive and intimate the experience is. To have somebody be able to move around and in proximity to you and whisper in your ear, or to hear enemies breathing around you. And the fact that there's very little to take you out of the experience. Certainly, if you're working in the indie space, you might not have the most amazing facial effects or animation or hair shaders or whatever. Well, all that goes away. And now you're only limited by the quality of the voice acting, which I hope we nailed, and the sound design. So it really allows for an immersive experience that I don't think I expected it to be quite as profound, I guess.
That's awesome.
I cannot wait to play this game.
Yeah.
As an audio director, I'm so excited, Dave.
Oh, right, yeah.
So another thing that we touched on briefly is that a lot of times, as we'd mentioned earlier, that inclusion can feel like this really big and overwhelming thing. But what we've seen within Xbox is a lot of times the most meaningful inclusive acts are really those small things. Mm-hmm. But they're small but meaningful. And so that really adds to the overall experience in a very authentic way, because we're not trying to say, go make it accessible or go make it, but it's how do we do that in a meaningful and authentic way? So we're really bringing that sense of joy that you were talking about that, kind of gets you teary-eyed when you see people experiencing your game that way. So I'd love to, ask you, Elise, when it came to Tell Me Why, mm-hmm. and some of those little things where attention is in the details, right?
Yes.
What are some of those little things that you guys did throughout the production, especially when it comes to representation, since mm-hmm. that was so key, mm-hmm. and from an inclusivity perspective in your game? What are some of those little things that you did to really enhance the experience?
I mean, if I had to generalize, I would say that the little thing that we did all along throughout production was listen. We collected feedback from so many different places and subject matter expertise from so many different places. We really leveraged our UR testing to make sure that our narrative was landing properly with our trans and non-binary player audience. We opened up really a very collaborative relationship with the voice actor who plays our Tyler character. His name is August Black, and he's been a very integral part of our creative team throughout the project and the development of this character, the building of this character as like a fully three-dimensional character, very complex and very real. So August has in session, we've given him kind of carte blanche to tell us if he thinks that a line isn't reading naturally, or he would say it differently. So he's really become almost like an embedded part of our narrative team in a way. These are just small examples, but I do think that really it's just about, how do I say this word, porosity, like remaining porous and taking in all of the feedback that we're getting from everyone involved in the production to really nail the narrative and the characters.
I love it. So I'm curious as to what kind of feedback you're getting from people who are playing the game that aren't part of developing it.
Yeah.
Well, what kind of feedback are you getting so far? And I'd love to ask this question to all three of you too. I know your games are out, but games that you're working on. But just I'm curious as to kind of the reaction from fans or the reactions from players as you're building the game.
Totally. The game's not yet released, so we don't have a ton of fan feedback. What I have more anecdotally is the feedback that we get from people that we show the game to and that we solicit feedback from. for example, like I had a call the other day, I was on a call the other day with our friends at GLAD, and we were discussing some of the issues represented, or that had to do with narrative and Tyler, and they basically had watched the first, like a rabbit run of the first, I don't know, 2 episodes in some form or another, and we got like, they were like, it gave us goosebumps. And that to me was amazing. We have had a lot of fan engagement since we made our announcement. I would say the immediate fan announcement, or the immediate product announcement, elicited a lot of feedback from hardcore Don't Nod fans. Don't Nod has a very, very dedicated fan base, so they were thrilled that there's another franchise on the horizon. And there was actually like this interesting thing that happened where like people started cosplaying Allison and Tyler, the twins, on Twitter. That was really amazing, and I'm sure will totally continue. And actually, I have a Twitter quote that I'd like to read, if I may, from a fan, because I read this last week and it really touched me. So this person who's anticipating the product release wrote this. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Having a trans main character in a game by a major studio and who is being voiced by a trans man is going to save lives. I feel seen and I can't thank Don't Nod enough for that. Oh, sorry, I just got all verklempt reading that. But it just like, I don't know, it just hit me really hard.
Yeah. Well, I think that speaks to the power of games, right? A lot of times games at the core are meant to be fun. And they can provide these incredibly meaningful experiences in ways that some of us can never even understand, but we can see and hear through our fans that the power that it has in their life, which is just gives you goosebumps all over. Yeah. So I'm curious, Dave, from you, what kind of feedback have you been hearing from different players as you've been creating the game?
Yeah, we have a fairly large group, about 100 to 200 visually impaired community members who have been participating in playing demos of our game. And the most amazing thing for me is we know that there's about 200 downloads, let's say, and we get over 150 to 200, like somewhere in the range of almost all of them respond back to our questions and our quiz, or not quizzes, what do you call it, surveys. And so we get a lot of feedback, and I mean pages and pages of feedback. And it's, first of all, it's such a gift too, to be able to have people that excited about it, and they're actively interested in the game. They're not, and you know, and they care about it. You know, they're not sugarcoating things. It's, again, the decorum is incredibly positive, but I know that they're going to take me to task with things that we might potentially get wrong. And I mean, a good example would be, again, because it's such a broad community, I ran into a lot of people who were very excited to have a main character, the main protagonist being from the visually impaired community. They felt it was something that was important for representation. They were thinking about their own experience when they're playing the game, and they were new to games in general. And then I had other people from the community who've been playing games, all audio games or audio games for years, and they said, hey, you know that it's sort of a trope for a sighted developer to make their main character blind in an all-audio game. And I said, I was starting to get that and seeing a lot of the other games out there. But it was an experience that I was so interested, a perspective I was interested in. Basically, they said, I would love that you're doing this, but make sure this person isn't their finding feature isn't their blindness. And I think just as a writer, I'd always intended to round out the character in a way that would slip away very quickly. But it was something that was very important for me to hear from the community to make sure that was a driving force in the arc of that character, that they did step away from that disability at very early in the game and become just a person in that experience. So those were the two, and you know, these varying opinions, and these communities are monoliths. So I think it is about hearing as many opinions as you can from the community.
Totally.
I do not think we could overstate that one enough. That one needs to come out. One, the trope of when you are not whatever experience you're creating, how do you make sure to bring in people where that is their lived experience? And the other point, just that because you bring in one person with that lived experience doesn't mean you get to shape that entire one, because any community is not a monolith. And so when making sure that we're designing that experience, being very aware of that, if it's not our own lived experience, making sure we're hearing from many people where it is their lived experience so that it can be a meaningful piece. So I would love to go to you, Dan, and ask about like lessons that you've learned through building in inclusive features into Forza. Because you kind of said every time you've learned something, then it stimulates or inspires you to move, try something else. So what kind of lessons have you learned that you're going to take into all future game development that you do? Because I know you're going to be around for years and years and years. Forza needs you.
Thank you. You know, it's interesting. I think this is part of the culture of the studio. We tend to look at where we failed more than where we succeeded. That's just kind of who we are. And so we do get a lot of fan feedback. And we did an update, I think I mentioned earlier, in Horizon to allow you to scale and change the font on the subtitles. And that just came from feedback where we realized we just got it wrong and we've got to do a better job. So we made an update. As we're doing this process, even on unannounced titles right now, of bringing players in and ideating and working with them, we're constantly learning new features, new things we could try. It's interesting though, I think as game developers, it's not that you ask somebody exactly what they want. In my experience, it's better to live in their shoes as best you can and have some empathy and see what they're doing. And you're right, they're not megalithic communities, they're not these monolithic communities. So you've got to kind of get a myriad of these ideas. And it's really about empowering the team. So as I look forward in the future even, I'm excited about what the team can do because of the exposure they have had to more diverse ideas. And I think it's important for people to keep a broad understanding, as you framed in the beginning, about inclusivity, representation, accessibility. It's about devices. It's about millions and millions of people who have different issues. And how do we give them the level of escape that we love? I mean, I love making games because I love playing games. And I love playing games with my kids. And we're in a time of fear right now. There's a lot of people stuck at home. We make the thing that's going to bring people together in this virtual world. I love that. Mm-hmm. We can't leave people by the side. So, I wish we could grab them all, but we can't. So it's just one step at a time. New little features that come in and blend together to create a new experience for new people. Mm-hmm.
And I love that too, that you're touching on that inclusion can mean so many different things to different people, that whether it's the type of game you play, whether it's an accessibility need, whether it's representation, whether it's can you afford to play the games or not, or wherever you live in the world, is there enough bandwidth for you to download the game, right? There's so many different ways to think about creating an inclusive experience in games, that we have this unique opportunity as a platform that creates fun and connection for people around the world, especially in a time like right now when we need to hunker down and stay there, yet it's a way that we can still meaningfully connect. So I think it's a really unique opportunity that we have within games that I think is really exciting, which is why I'm here. But Elise, I would love to ask you a question about when you think about the lessons learned and just the experience that people are going to have once they play Tell Me Why. Mm-hmm. What kind of new horizons or new doors do you hope that Tell Me Why opens for future games to come?
Yeah. I mean, I honestly hope that the impact, I think that my dream for Tell Me Why is that it's a vehicle for candidly discussing inclusive production practices and how they work, what the value of those investments are, and then moving that forward. I mean, I'm really proud of the work that we've done on Tell Me Why, but I also see it as a point along a much larger trajectory. There's so much more that we can do. And I hope that the industry will start really embracing inclusive production practices in their frameworks. That is something that I see happening within Xbox Studios that I think is super exciting, is that each product that gets made, we're starting to look as individual studios at what things were done to make that production inclusive and maybe roll that up to the next thing that we do. So I think that kind of proliferation within the development industry is very important.
Awesome. Okay, so in our final question, this is going to be a speed round question so we can make sure to get it in. So 30 seconds to each of you, and I'm going to start with you, Dave. Start with you, Dave. But what's one tip that you would have for other developers when it comes to making their games more inclusive or approaching the process of building an inclusive game? 30 seconds.
Well, sure, I'll start with the obvious one, and that's consult the community, meet the community, play with the community, listen to the community. That's, yeah, for sure the number one.
Awesome. We'll go to you, Elise.
I think that there is a myth around the cost of inclusive production practices. I did some back of the napkin math with my producer the other day, and we calculated that the hard costs of all of our inclusive production practices on Tell Me Why was less than 2%. This leads me to believe and conclude that this can be scaled across a production of any size. So I really just want to end with that.
Thank you.
Well, +1 on Dave, absolutely. Play with the community, build with the community. I think the other thing I'd say is that just allocate some time. It's not that it takes extra time, there will be greater reward out of it. Allocate some time early on to be prototyping these ideas the way we would prototype a new feature.
Absolutely.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you all very much for joining. This has been an awesome discussion. And I just really want to say, I hope that everyone is taking away that inclusive gaming can mean big things, but it can also mean really small and meaningful things. And it really is a studio of any size, whether you're a single developer or to AAA and everything in between. We really can be making more inclusive games because when we invite more people to play, we're creating more opportunities for fun for people everywhere around the world. And so at Xbox, we are really committed to making experiences that are fun for all 2 billion plus gamers on the planet. And we really hope that you join us on this mission, everyone across the industry.